everyone, and welcome again to another edition of Encora Talks. I am Daniela Garcia, and our topic for today is elevated cybersecurity, privilege, identity management, and zero trust. Ankit Agarwal is our invited expert. With more than 2 decades of admirable experience in IT security governance and infrastructure, Mr. Ankit has safeguarded some of the country's most critical assets. He is known for developing and formalizing best in class enterprise governance, architecture, engineering, threat intelligence, security risk management, data loss and fraud prevention, and identity and access management. Highly focused on driving continuous improvement, Mr. Ankit maximizes security program efficiency and minimizing cost. His expertise covers a broad spectrum of technology risk areas, including enterprise risk and vulnerability management. He excels at developing security monitoring strategies and operational processes and procedures. Mr. Ankit serves as a strategic leader for enterprise IS and security organizations, providing executive leadership aligned with the organization's strategic vision, mission, goals, values, and budget. He has been responsible for designing security initiatives that align with company wide programs and business objectives, ensuring all information, assets, and technologies, of course, are adequately secure and resilient. Hello, Mr. Ankit. We're thrilled to have you here and welcome to Encora Talks.
Thanks, Daniela. Thanks, Daniela, for the introduction. I'm humbled, and it's very nice to talk on the cybersecurity front, where Incora has been front runner in developing those cybersecurity standards and implementing it. So I believe it will be a nice session where I'll be sharing our insights into the work that we have done and a very interesting topic, the zero trust, which is the need of the hour in the current scenario where the threat landscape is changing. So hello everyone. So the next 30-35 minutes I will be talking on privileged identity management and also mapping it with the standards of the zero trust. A very interesting topic. All of you must be aware about the zero trust, a lot of things and research and development going on, and a lot of articles and a lot of product manufacturers, they are talking about the zero trust, how you can secure your organization security landscape and how you can protect your organization assets. And so the entire webinar will be talking on two fronts: what is zero trust actually, and how we can map the zero trust framework and principles in securing the identities. So before going across, I always ask, there are certain questions that always comes into mind when somebody starts a zero trust journey. So the first question that is there, that is zero trust a solution, a framework? Now, I have seen organization, they struggle to understand how to implement the zero trust, and whether it's a framework or whether it's adoption of a product will implement a zero trust. So the valid question that comes into mind is whether it's zero trust a solution or framework. I think in coming uh, during the course of the webinar, we'll understand this. Other question that comes into mind: how long you have taken to finish zero trust implementation? I will say that zero trust is a marathon. It's and it works on a sprint principles, and it is not a 1 week, 1 month, or 6 months effort. It's a continuous exercise to implement the zero trust. And every time when the organization takes initiative for the zero trust implementation, it's only a beginning, and it will constantly evolve over the period of time to counter the evolving threats. The third question, since the topic is the identities, so the third question that comes into mind is how the organization tag and differentiate between different identities into the environment. So we look at the definition of the identities in the coming slides. The fourth thing that comes across is, do you have a system in place to manage the passwords? Everybody says that yes, the passwords, we have a strong multi-factor authentication in place. We have the policies where we define certain standards for managing and creating the passwords, which goes from 12 digit to 14 digit, a complexity and everything. But at certain point of time, but we have seen the instances where the passwords are written, and whether you go on the social media, LinkedIn and everything, you will see certain posts where you see the flashes of the image where the password is copied somewhere on the screen and everything. So again, though we have controls in place, still the question comes in, how do you manage the passwords of the identities, whether it's normal, whether it's privilege. So how do you manage the passwords? And the next one is, how many events are generated in past 6 months about identity password leakage? There is no specific measure to, uh, there is no specific controls available to measure how you can identify the password leakage, and so for the count what happened. Because there are stringent controls available where in any instance where the password leakage is, their system automatically block the IDs. But to understand the events, how many are generated in a particular period of time, is very critical. And this helps in implementing the zero trust journey for the identity management. And do everybody ask for the privilege level of access? Of course, the answer is yes. Our business nature has become more agile, and it has adopted a culture of techno-social working style. And whosoever conducts business, whosoever generates revenues, they always want to have a privilege level of access. You might, whenever you go to a developer and ask, can I remove a local admin access? A very crude example, you want to remove a local admin access for any developers, they will say, no, I cannot work it. But again, when if you really want to implement a zero trust journey, the privilege level of access should be controlled, and it should work on the least level of privileges. So these are certain set of questions that helps you to understand the zero trust journey, and how you can map the zero trust, the entire framework, and or the solution, whatever you call is, to implement the identity governance in your organization. Now, coming back, you might have seen this slide. You might have seen the zero trust definition, which says that you always verify, you never trust. So we have gone from the principle of explicit trust or implicit trust to eliminate the trust level at every point of time whenever there is a constant interaction between systems. Now, the systems can be anything. You might have as two system identities interacting with each other. You might be having a user accessing a system. You might be having a user accessing a network device. So there are certain scenarios and combinations where everywhere there is a constant validation is required whenever there is an interaction happening. And when you eliminate an implicit trust during that digital interaction, and you start validating, then you start on the over the path of the zero trust. Now, as you see here in the diagram, there are four key things that zero trust talks about. Zero trust for identities, zero trust for endpoints. Endpoints are typically the laptops on which the organization uses works. The third thing is the network. Network is very critical because everything runs on the network, the base, the network layer with respect to OSI reference model. And I have seen the cases where the product manufacturer has is they're trying to reduce the importance of maintaining the network monitoring, and they talk about only managing the endpoints, and start creating a flat network. But implementing a zero trust in the network is equally critical. Then the fourth component is the application. Your application, whether it's running in cloud or on-prem. So maintaining a zero trust within the application environment is also very critical. Now, you would say that most of the organization, they adopt the SaaS services from the different vendors. You talk about Microsoft, you talk about Google's, or you take away the third party applications, for example, Slack, Jira. the productivity tools, everything has gone over the cloud. So the product manufacturers, they have moved their on-premise component to the cloud offering, which has become very easy for organization to work, easy to use, and easy to adopt. But at the same time, the adoption, after the adoption itself, it is very necessary to protect the data. Everything is on cloud, though the OEMs, the product manufacturers, they provide you a reasonable assurance that your data is safe. You have a tenant profiling between two organization. Your data cannot overlap, but at the same time, once you adopt any solution, the same type of principles that you do within your organization for your homegrown application or endpoint, the same principle should go for the third party applications. And I have seen that most of the standard product manufacturers or these OEMs, they provide relevant controls which can be utilized and zero trust can be implemented. So when we talk about these four pillars, often I have seen that organization mix, and when they try to protect an endpoint, they assume that identity is also protected. Similarly, when they try to protect the network, they understand that we have protected the servers where the applications are running. But again, these four things are very different. And the answer to the first question, zero trust is a framework. It's not a product. So any product which supports the zero trust framework, it provides a piece of the service. And you might have to mix and match if you want to cover all those four pillars. It may be possible that a single OEM or the product manufacturer may not provide all these services. But having said that, let's not go about the product manufacturing case. So zero trust is again a solution and a framework. And the base principle is you have to eliminate the implicit trust and continuously validate every stage of a digital interaction. Now, when we move forward, this is a diagrammatic representation where how actually the zero trust works. So you have a different components where the zero trust, our policy engine runs in as a base, as a core for every solution in the zero trust framework. And the policy engines, it provides certain level of features which includes like constant monitoring, identities directory services, a policies running, security, trust, and the data. So any solution which is implemented, the policy engines continuously validate the requests which are coming from the source. Your source can be an endpoint, your source can be a network, your source can be an identity itself, your source can be an application itself. So anything which tries to consume anything on the other side, it has to go via through the policy engine. And the policy engine, before implementing it, constantly validate the data, and based on the policies, the dynamic policies, the contextual policies that you define on the platform, it takes a certain decision. And the decision might not be static, it might change also. One example, like an identity who is accessing any service a moment ago from a different geo, and as soon as it's very common them for every developer to connect through the VPN, and your IP address or the geolocation changes. So here the context has changed. 5 minutes back, the location might be India. I don't know, 5 minutes after 5 minutes, it might be a location in United States. So as soon as these type of contextual changes happens, the decision also changes by the policy engine of the zero trust. So it's a constant validation. The validation are based on certain policies, which can be anything. It might be the policy might be defined for the application, for the use of the application, for the tenant profiling. It might be based on the geolocation. So there are plethora of things are available which can be mapped, and different permutation or combination can be made within the policy engine. And after the validation, a certain decision is taken place. If the decision is correct, and if you are allowed, then a trust happens between a source and a destination. This is how the entire zero trust framework works. This entire framework has been consumed by the products, and that's how they deliver the zero trust services. Now, moving on, in the last two slides, we have understood that it's a framework which act as a guidance to realign the old practices to continuously evolve standards of security. As I said, as I referred initially, also, it's a continuous evolving practice. It never stops. The threat landscape is changing. Whatever the solution that you implement, you know, the other force of attackers, they will always try to improvise and start doing the sophisticated attacks. One example I can quote that, in past 3 4 years, almost every URL has converted to HTTPS. Previously, organization could manage their application by running on a HTTP protocol port 80, but now HTTPS has been become a standard. That's how the attacker also, whenever you see any phishing or spamming link, that will also come as HTTPS. So as soon as you evolve any standard of security, you will see the more sophistication will come in terms of threats. And that's why you have to continuously evolve the standard of security, and the zero trust provides a framework which also continuously evolve as these threat landscape changes. Implementation is a marathon. It's not easy to implement the four pillars: identity, endpoint, network, and the application. It might take years to understand it, to implement it in phases, and have this journey fulfilled. It focuses on both source and destination, just like a two-way handshake, and continuously framework involved, which includes new and improvement in existing digital transaction areas. So you would see that the governing bodies, or the likes of this framework, they continuously adopt and change their framework so that they can understand and they can improvise to counter any threat landscape which is coming. Now, when you talk about the zero trust pillars and capabilities, you have the users, where again the AAA factor would come: authentication, authorization, or auditing. Then a term which we'll be talking about is a privilege access management. Then you have a device, again the authentication, authorization, and compliance would come, where you would check the security posture. Then you have a network environment, where you can have a software defined networking. You can have a macro segmentation involved. When we talk about the application and workload, you have a software defined compute, you have a DevSecOps now coming up, you have a software supply chain, a very interesting field which is gaining much momentum to understand. We have seen the cases where the software supply chain attack are very sophisticated, and it has taken the entire product down, out from the market. Then you have application deliveries, and then in terms of the data, whatever the data exchange has been taken, so you have the data tagging. You need to understand the data loss prevention and the data right management. Then once these areas are covered and you have a sufficient data, you can have a more visibility analytics which constantly changes, and the entire zero trust provide your contextual awareness. So that means that you no longer has to define the very static policies. The policy engine can take a call based on the changing scenarios. You can have accounting and analytics, you can have discovery and baselining, and then you have your sims, so and ever evolving these platforms which can aggregate the logs and provide you more visibility, which is coupled by the artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithm. So most of the product owners now, they use the artificial intelligence to reduce the reaction time of detecting the threats and then localizing it. And there the machine learning and artificial intelligence has come pretty handy to understand those things. The reaction time is reduced from hours to minutes now. Then on top, you can do an automation and orchestration. So these are the zero trust focus areas, but now we'll be focusing on the part which is the privilege access management. So what is an identity? Now identity is everywhere. Though consider a case like social security number. It is an identity of any human, in a country, in a specific country. Now the social identity numbers might change their way, their names, how it is governed in different countries, but that number is tagged to any human. Similarly, you have a digital identity, where the organization are tasked to protect that digital identity, because every identity, it carries something whenever it is created. And a possible leakage or theft, identity theft, can result into the loss of data, which can be towards a person or an organization. So when we talk about the definition of identity, what is an identity? It represents a people, it can represent a service, or it can represent the IoT device. Now these are the three categories of whenever we talk about the digital identities. A people, a human, it carries a digital identity. For example, I have my email ID created by Encora, so I have a digital identity within an organization and also over the internet space. Similarly, when we talk about the services, I can have my homegrown application which is consuming some digital tokens to deliver services or data to the people who are consuming it. And it might deliver the data to a service, or it can be a human. So again, the service identity is very critical. I have seen that most of the organization, they fail to protect the service identity, and that is a possible source of vulnerability into the system. The third thing which is coming up hard is IoT devices. Now, IoT devices, when you talk about the sensor, the difficult part is you cannot monitor it using an agent-based installation. It has to be agentless installation. And the sensors, it can be probed, and once you are successfully able to probe the IoT device, you can gather much of the data. So when now, since the entire landscape has changed and organizations are moving to the smart manufacturing with the use of more and more automations, which requires more and more electronic devices, use of sensors and everything. So the protecting the identity of the IoT device is becoming as critical as protecting the identity of people and services. Now, when we talk about the in the zero trust model, they function as a powerful, flexible, and granular way to control access to the data. As soon as you create a digital identity, it comes with certain rights, and it is a task for the IT or the governance to understand what access to the data is available and how you can control it. So, as per the zero trust framework, any identity, it should be created with the least privilege accesses, and the elevation to control access of the data should happen only in just in time principle. And as soon as you start doing it, that means you are on a correct path of implementing the zero trust journey. And when an identity attempts to access a resource, what an organization must do? It should verify the identity with a strong authentication. We have taken an example where I've mentioned that a password creation, an organization defines certain standards. For example, it might be a 12 characters password or 14. Then you constantly enforce the change every n number of times, 45 days, 90 days, or 180 days, depending on the organization policies and principles. Then over the top, those password contains certain special characters. So again, the identity should be validated using the strong authentication. Now the MFA principle has come. Ensure access is compliant and typical for that identity. Whenever the identity is accessing from what platform, the platform should be compliant, and it should adhere to certain standards. If the identity is able to get into a system which is non-compliant, you should have the strong controls available to block that access at the same time. Again, the principle of zero trust comes here. The follow the least privilege access principle, as we mentioned. So when this is a typical definition of the identity. Now, why we have to protect the identity? As per as, the survey which is conducted by the IBM, more than 20% of the malicious breaches happens due to the compromised identity. If you see these graphs, there are other type of attacks also, but as soon as the main focus, as soon as you have a compromised identity somewhere, you have the probability of that data leakage increased to much level, and the cost, the loss, whether it's terms of revenue, whether it's terms of reputation, is huge. That's why it is very critical to understand how you do an identity governance and how you manage the compromised credentials. Now, again, when you talk about the identity theft losses, this is again some of the one survey that I have mentioned in this slide, where 40% of the people, they have been victim of the social media identity theft. 40% has been targeted of SMS phishing, and 33% has experienced a financial account takeover at least once. So these are certain stats which clearly indicates the need for the identity governance and con- put in controls in in your entire cybersecurity landscape, so you can minimize these percentage to lowest level. So the task is you minimize the vulnerability aspects and reduce the risk from high to low. Now, moving on, I will, this slides talk about the identity types. So generally, we define the identity into four types. One is the normal user identity, which is to gain access to the organization workloads and deliver services. Now, a very generic example is whenever a user is onboarded by an organization, an email ID is created. Generally, we talk about now the email ID, we don't talk about the domain IDs and everything. But as soon as the normal user identity is created, it comes with certain privileges, and the privileges might be to access the organization workload and then start delivering the services. So somebody will gain access to, somebody will have the access to the laptops. The laptops will be, secured, it will be validated. The users, when they have the access to the identity, they can log into the laptops and start delivering the services. Other thing is service identity non-human. We have spoken a few minutes back that it performs the unmonitored and automated privilege level functions. Normally, whenever these service identities are created, these passwords are stored in Excels, and once these identities are created, those passwords are, once they are created, when they are also not rotated. And this is a potential problem which comes in when you don't deal about the service identities and you leave them as it is, assuming that there is a less risk to be compromised, which is a potential problem. Now the fourth thing is the privileged identities. Now, any elevation to a user to perform critical functions to support various organization functions. So this is something that, privilege identity should be taken care of, and you should have the governing principles available where you can manage a privilege identity, and then you have the regression testing tools. So these are the four key types of identities available, and the entire identity governance landscape revolves around this. And this is where the zero trust framework, talks about. So it is very critical. If you refer to the some of the questions that was in the first slide, so any organization must tag and differentiate between these four type of identity: a normal user, privileged identity, service identity, and regression testing tool. And there comes the privileged access management systems, which talks about managing these identities, privilege identities. And you should implement the controls where the privileged identity should be secured in a vault. The password must be rotated by certain systems, by certain products, and you should implement certain scenarios where any elevation from the normal user identity to the privileged identity, it should be just in time. Normally, as a standard practice, any user requiring a privileged identity should carry a secondary identity also. Now, traditional IAM, we establish a trust using authentication and other verification method. The identity of end user can be confirmed to secure transaction and data. And then you enforce the policy in admin time, runtime access controls. Now, these things has been changed by the zero trust principles, where we talk about the identity management and governance. We talk about identity management, credentials management. We talk about the federation, access management, and governance. So there, I will end this webinar and give you a food of thought about to manage. Now, Incola has been front runner in implementing these identity and governance over these years. We have been successfully able to implement these with the help of different tools and different use case scenarios. So it is we protect our normal identities, privileged identities, so even the service identities. Incora has developed an entire center of excellence to implement, to understand the different use cases, implement and adopt the solutions. So I think it will be good if you can take the Incora's expertise and help in implementing and securing your organization identities. So there I will end my presentation, and thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ankit, for all this valuable information. We are now ready to start with our Q&A section, and the first question we have for you is, has Encora implemented the entire identity security program in-house?
Yes, Janila. So Encore Zero Trust journey with Encore started almost 3.5 years back, and still we are implementing it. And the entire program, we have taken support from the organization, the product manufacturer initially, but we have now the entire team of SMEs who run this program in house, and we have implemented this entire security program in house.
Thank you, Ankit. How was the journey of implementing this technology at Encora?
It is a fabulous journey, and the reason being because we believe that when we are delivering services to the clients, we should be able to provide a very a comfort level to the client that their data is safe, and we have our risk level at the lowest when we deliver services or develop products for them. So this journey of implementing this has been fabulous and awesome, and we have been constantly validate and we constantly improvise to implement the changes in our security program.
Okay. And the final question, Ankit, is, are external service subscriptions required for identity management?
Yeah, definitely yes. So it is not that we can just develop our own product. There's no point. The amount of the R&D and amount of the money requires to develop your in-house product is insane. So yes, external service subscriptions are required for the identity management, but as I said, it might require a combination of the tools, and a single product might not do it. So it should be very careful consideration what subscription should be adopted, and how the
Mhm.
use case should be mapped. And that is where the Incora has been always successful in identifying different technologies and implementing a subset of it. And that's how we have been pretty much successful in maintaining our security posture.
Thank you, Ankit. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please keep an eye out for more webinars that we will be hosting soon. We also invite you to watch the recorded webinars we have posted on talks.encora.com. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.